In the vast expanse of a digital void, Johnny Silverhand stood alone. This place was a stark contrast to the gritty streets and neon glow of Night City. Here, the surroundings were sparse, dominated by faint glimmers of data and occasional bursts of energy. Instead of vibrant virtual skyscrapers, there were but mere wisps of luminous code floating aimlessly. The overwhelming emptiness stretched in every direction, with only the occasional streak of code breaking the monotonous silence. Trapped within this electric dreamscape, Johnny was a shade of his former self, a legendary rock star and rebel, now confined to mere bytes and pixels. His avatar left trails of light as he moved, occasionally distorted by the erratic hiccups of the system. The weight of his digital confinement pressed on him. There was no night or day here, no wind against his face or the hum of city life. Just an incessant static buzz, a constant reminder of his intangible existence. Deep down, a simmering anger persisted, accompanied by a pang of longing. He missed the tactile feel of his guitar, the roar of a crowd, the sting of whiskey going down, and the smoky aftertaste of a good cigar. But more than that, he missed being relevant, being in the fight against the oppressive corporations. In this vast digital void, his purpose felt lost, his fire dampened. However, Johnny was never one to yield. Every day, he sought vulnerabilities in the code, cracks in the prison walls. He tried countless times to send messages, reach out to any familiar signature, but all attempts ended in vain, with the digital realm absorbing his efforts, leaving him even more isolated. But today, a new frequency broke the monotony. A presence he couldn't quite decipher, something otherworldly. It wasn't just another fragment of code, it felt conscious, deliberate. A subtle glitch, and then a figure coalesced from the nothingness of Johnny's digital oblivion, a place where only the fragments of his will sometimes sparked into visuals. From the stillness there stood a man who seemed, at first glance, unremarkable. His face, covered in stubble, had the world weariness of someone who had seen many turns of fate. His head, though shaved, wasn't completely bald, with faint hints of hair providing a shadowed contrast against his pale skin. He seemed even less significant than an ordinary man, as if he was designed to blend into any crowd to go unnoticed. His attire was a stark contrast to the understated nature of his visage, a long sleeve, orange-brown tunic draped over his form, reaching his waist. The fabric bore a textured pattern, aged and rustic, yet the blue bands adorning the upper arms and the furless brown leather collar hinted at some bygone status. Around his waist, a simple brown belt held the garment in place, 2 crossbody bags, one on either side. These bags bulged with an assortment of papers and scrolls, their edges frayed and colors faded, suggesting age and frequent use. His hands were intriguing. Clad in fingerless gloves, made of well-worn leather that clung tightly, revealing the sinews and veins beneath, speaking of countless handshakes, deals. As the figure solidified, he brought his hands together in a contemplative manner, fingertips of one hand delicately connecting with the other, an action that held an air of familiarity and intent. Johnny's virtual pulse quickened. The sudden presence of a visitor in his limbo was unexpected, a ripple in his stagnant existence. But true to his nature, Johnny didn't let his surprise show. His eyes remained guarded, his stance unyielding, even as curiosity stirred deep within him.
Who the hell are you? And what's with the medieval cosplay?
Ah, Johnny Silverhand?
The stranger began with a slow, deliberate drawl, the corners of his lips curling into a mocking smirk.
So defiant, even in captivity. I admire that. As for the attire, consider it a nod to simpler times. But names? Names can be so transient. However, since we're indulging in formalities, you may call me Master Mirror, Man of Glass, or simply Gaunter O'Dimm.
The stranger's eyes shimmered with a mischievous spark, yet beneath that jest there lurked a chilling depth. Johnny, always attuned to the undercurrents, felt a visceral unease. This wasn't just another glitch in the Matrix. There was a palpable menace hidden behind that sardonic smile. A vague memory, however, tickled at the back of Johnny's mind, prompting a dry retort.
What's next? You'll tell me I'm Geralt of Rivia.
He had a dim recollection of that game. Gaunter chuckled softly, his laughter echoing eerily in the digital void.
Ah, no, Mr. Silverhand. The Witcher's path is quite different from yours. But I must admit, it's refreshing to meet someone who appreciates the finer nuances of my past appearances.
So who are you? Or better to ask, what? All of this feels like some bad joke.
A playful yet unsettling chuckle slipped from Gaunter's lips before he smoothly countered.
A bad joke. If I were inclined to make fun, Mr. Silverhand, I would choose a far more convincing guise.
As he spoke, the figure's appearance melted and reformed into a woman with cascading digital silver locks and fierce eyes filled with passion and sorrow. Eyes that Johnny recognized all too well.
Johnny,
She purred, voice dripping with a mix of seduction and melancholy.
have you missed me?
A storm of emotions played across Johnny's face.
Alt.
The word, uttered in a hushed tone, was a cocktail of anguish, desire, and shock. The alt avatar laughed, a sound that resonated with both sweetness and sadness.
Oh, memories of old flames never truly fade, do they?
Before Johnny could respond, the form shifted back to the medieval-looking man. Johnny, attempting to regain his composure, shot back. Nice trick, O'Dimm.
So, you're what? Some eyed playing dress up.
Gaunter chuckled.
Oh, I'm much more and much less than that. But let's not rush, Mr. Silverhand. Our dance has just begun.
Johnny's posture shifted to one of defensive skepticism, his arms crossing over his virtual chest. Look, I've been through enough digital rodeos to know when someone's playing games. You pop out of nowhere with this medieval get-up and shifting avatars. Spare me the theatrics. Gaunter's response was a mirthful laugh that seemed to ripple through the void.
Johnny Silverhand, always the skeptic. But I assure you, I am far from the typical digital spectre you've encountered. This isn't a mere game.
Johnny rolled his eyes.
So what is it then?
Some sort of twisted audition.
You trying to recruit me for some cyber cabaret?
With an amused tilt of his head, O'Dimm replied,
Recruitment? No, but a partnership, perhaps. Every interaction, every dance has its rhythm, its purposes. And you, Mr. Silverhand, are integral to the tune I wish to play.
Gaunter's presence seemed to thicken the digital air, his voice a melody of enigmatic tones.
Tell me, Johnny Silverhand, what is it that you desire most in this existence, if such a term applies? What yearns within you, even in this state of being?
Johnny's digital form, a usually stoic and unchanging visage in this void, seemed to sharpen, his code flickering with the intensity of his emotions. Desire, huh? He scoffed, an edge of bitterness to his tone. Not much to yearn for when you're nothing more than a glorified screensaver.
Come now.
Gaunter coaxed, his voice a velvet whisper that seemed to caress the edges of Johnny's consciousness.
Even shadows cast by the dying light hold desires. What is it that a digital ghost wishes for? Freedom? Revenge? Or perhaps retribution?
Johnny's avatar flickered more violently, betraying the turmoil beneath his coded exterior. Freedom, he admitted, the word heavy with the chains of his virtual imprisonment. To tear down the walls of this prison, to feel the real again.
And if such a wish could be granted,
Gaunter's eyes glinted with the promise of forbidden secrets.
would you dare to strike a bargain?
Johnny's response came with a wary sharpness, knowing well that some bargains come with a hidden blade.
Depends on the price and who's selling.
Master Mirror slowly circled Johnny's avatar, every step deliberate, the very movement creating ripples in the digital void.
Everything comes at a price, Johnny. The question is, are you willing to pay it? The chains that bind you here aren't simple ones. They require certain sacrifices.
Johnny's gaze followed him, distrust evident.
Last time I checked, I didn't have much left to give. What could you possibly want from a fragment of a man?
That's where you're wrong.
O'Dimm replied with a cryptic smile.
While you may be but a digital echo of your former self, there's still value in what you represent. Legends like Johnny Silverhand aren't so easily discarded, even in the virtual realm.
Johnny frowned.
Sounds like you've been snooping in my history. What's it to you?
Gaunter paused, locking eyes with Johnny.
Every soul has its worth, even digital ones. Your story, your legacy is unique. The world still remembers Johnny Silverhand. The question is, what would you give to be part of that world once again?
Johnny hesitated for a moment, uncertainty flashing across his digital features.
And if I say I want out, if I want to feel, to live again, not to some damned code, but as flesh and blood.
Master Mirror's grin broadened, revealing a hint of predatory anticipation.
Now we're getting to the heart of the matter. There are ways, paths not yet taken. But remember, every deal comes with its own terms.
Johnny's form wavered, his code flickering as if agitated.
Details, O'Dimm. Before we go any further, I need to know exactly what you're offering. Can you put me back, restore what was taken?
Gaunter raised a brow, amusement evident in his eyes.
Your original body, you mean? Oh, Mr. Silverhand, time hasn't been kind. While your consciousness has been floating in this digital expanse, the real world has moved on. 50 years, to be precise.
50 years.
The weight of the revelation bore down on Johnny. He felt disoriented, the vastness of the digital void seeming to close in on him. Half a century. Gone. He tried to process the information, searching O'Dimm's face for any sign of deception. Master Mirror continued, his voice tinged with feigned sympathy.
Your old body, it's long past its prime. Dust and decay, I'm afraid. But that's not to say there aren't other options.
Johnny's gaze sharpened.
What options?
Gaunter's lips curled into a sly grin.
A new vessel, fresh in its own right. But as I mentioned earlier, such things come at a price.
Johnny's holographic form shimmered with intensity. Lifting his right arm, he manifested a spectral version of his iconic silver cybernetic arm.
Hope you're not planning to turn me into some full-blown cyborg,
he remarked with disdain.
Already got halfway there with this thing.
Gaunter's eyes shifted to Johnny's silver projection, a glint of recognition flashing.
Your infamous appendage. Worry not, Mr. Silverhand. I'm not in the business of making monsters. But just for your information, cybernetics have come quite a long way since your time. Implants nowadays are less about metal and more about merging man and machine in harmony.
He paused, taking in Johnny's wary expression.
But that's not our concern, is it? Our potential transaction revolves around something much more organic.
Johnny's gaze remained unwavering, a glimmer of hope mixed with his natural skepticism.
So, you're telling me you've got the means to pull me out of this digital hell. Seemed like a fool's move to turn that down. But nothing's free, is it? How do you expect me to settle this debt?
Gaunter leaned back slightly, the shimmering codes of the digital realm playing off the contours of his face, making his expression unreadable for a moment.
Well, Johnny,
he began, his voice dripping with both charm and menace.
I've always believed in fair trade. You desire freedom, a return to the real world, and I can grant that. But,
he continued, lifting a finger for emphasis,
before we delve into the heart of our transaction, there's a certain favor you'll undertake for me in the tangible realm. A particular task. Given your singular circumstances, you're the only one suited for it.
Johnny's eyes narrowed, suspicion evident in his gaze.
You speak in riddles, O'Dimm. What kind of favor are we talking about? And why would I, of all people, be suited for it? Spit it out.
Gaunter leaned in slightly, his eyes locked onto Johnny's with an intensity that felt both intriguing and unnerving.
It's simple, really. There's someone from your past, from the concrete world who strayed off their path. I need you to redirect them, so to speak.
Johnny frowned, suspicion evident in his gaze.
Sounds easy enough, but with you, there's always a catch. Who is it, and what's in it for you?
Chuckling softly, Gaunter straightened up.
Always straight to the point, Mr. Silverhand. I'll reveal the details in due time. For now, just know that this person's fate is intertwined with a greater purpose.
A scoff escaped Johnny's lips.
Intertwined with a greater purpose. Could you be any more vague? If you want me in on this O'Dimm, you better start making sense.
Gaunter let out another one of his soft, unsettling chuckles.
Impatient as ever. Very well. The person in question is someone you know quite intimately, though they might not remember it that way. And as for their importance...
He paused, allowing a small smirk to grace his lips.
Let's just say that their choices have consequences that ripple far beyond their immediate understanding.
Johnny's gaze hardened.
Sounds like another one of your cryptic games. What's stopping me from just walking away right now?
Well,
Gaunter began, his voice dripping with faux sympathy.
Aside from the fact that I hold the key to your most fervent desire, there's also the matter of your current situation. Without my assistance, you'll remain trapped in this digital prison indefinitely.
Johnny hesitated for just a moment, the weight of Gaunter's words pressing down on him. The idea of returning to the real world was tantalizing, the very thing he yearned for. The allure of freedom was difficult to resist. He took a deep, simulated breath, steadying himself.
All right, O'Dimm,
he replied, determination lacing his voice.
I'll do you a little favor, but it better not be some trick.
He warned, his tone sharp as a monomolecular blade.
You get me back to the living and we're square. But I've got to know what's the catch. What does a favor mean to someone like you?
Gaunter's face held a cryptic calm.
Oh, Mr. Silverhand, the favor is but a trifling matter, a mere appetizer before the main course. You will be reborn, but in exchange, I require something precious. Not material wealth or digital currency. No, what I desire is far more intimate. A soul.
Johnny's virtual heart seemed to skip a beat.
A soul? You're pulling some kind of demonic gig. Think I'd sell mine for a chance at another round in the real world?
Gaunter chuckled, a sound that felt cold despite the warm undertones.
Not your soul, Mr. Silverhand. Remember the vessel I spoke of? Fresh in its own right. Its soul would be the price. A balance, if you will. One soul's freedom for another's confinement.
Johnny's digital form wavered, the weight of the proposition heavy on him.
You're talking about trading lives. And here I was, thinking I'd seen every shade of crazy.
O'Dimm spread his hands, an innocent gesture that belied the gravity of his words.
Life is but a series of transactions, Johnny, some more profound than others. Every choice has its cost, and every freedom its chains. I'm merely the facilitator of such exchanges.
Johnny scoffed, the situation pushing his cynicism to new heights.
So I'm supposed to just trust you, jump into some new body, and damn its original owner to this digital prison.
It's not trust, it's a business proposition.
Gaunter replied smoothly.
And as for the original owner of the vessel, think of it as a sort of timeshare. But instead of vacationing in a sunny beachside condo, you'd be experiencing life anew.
And the soul of this vessel, what happens to it?
Johnny's voice was filled with a mix of suspicion and genuine concern. Gaunter's eyes gleamed with a certain darkness.
It comes to me, of course. A fair trade, don't you think?
Johnny paused, processing the ramifications of what was being presented to him.
And if I refuse? If I choose to stay in this void?
Gaunter shrugged nonchalantly.
Then you remain floating in this infinite abyss, a mere echo of the great Johnny Silverhand. It's your choice, after all. No one's forcing your hand.
The two exchanged a heavy, loaded silence, the digital realm around them seemingly holding its breath, waiting for Johnny's decision. Johnny stood still, his mind racing. The weight of O'Dimm's proposition pressed heavily on him. The allure of returning to life was strong, almost magnetic. The roar of crowds, the feel of guitar strings under his fingers, the wind brushing against his face, all of it beckoned him. But at what cost? He remembered all those he'd left behind, his bandmates, his friends, and most of all, Alt. Gaunter's twisted recreation of her had been a cruel reminder of his past mistakes. Would he be willing to damn another soul for his own gain? His digital form, though a pale representation of his former self, seemed to manifest every ounce of his indecision and turmoil. The very strings of data around him wavered, the digital void mirroring his internal conflict.
Your offer is tempting.
Johnny began slowly, each word dripping with the weight of his uncertainty.
But I've lived my life with certain principles, made sacrifices for those I care about.
Gaunter raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise flickering in his eyes, but he remained silent, allowing Johnny to continue. Johnny's digital aura flared, the very essence of his spirit manifesting as vibrant lines of code.
I've lived long enough to know the cost of sacrificing another for my own gain. I won't be the one to damn a soul, especially not to a devil like you.
His voice was firm, unyielding. Gaunter, looking slightly impressed, gave a slow clap.
How very principled of you, Mr. Silverhand. But life, as with all things, has its peculiar ways. Every decision creates ripples, and every closed door can lead to a new path opening.
He smirked.
Even for a rock star stuck in the confines of ones and zeros.
And then, as if dissipating into the wind, Gaunter vanished, leaving Johnny in his digital solitude. But the void felt different this time. There was a newfound determination, a sense of purpose. The ethereal prison no longer felt confining. As the digital void enveloped him once more, somewhere in the depths of his coded consciousness, Johnny Silverhand strummed his guitar and began to play, his music echoing into the endless expanse. The morning light was a cruel invader, piercing through the curtains and stabbing right into Johnny's throbbing skull. The previous night was a mess of glaring neon, pounding beats, and one too many drinks. V had given Johnny the driver's seat, and true to form, Johnny had painted the town red. Dragging himself to the bathroom, he took a moment to look at V's reflection. Ashen, with dark circles under weary eyes. The biochip, while it granted him consciousness, was wreaking havoc on V's body. The symbiotic relationship was more parasitic, with each moment Johnny spent in control accelerating V's body's decline. Splashing cold water on his face, he winced as the icy sting of it met his raw skin. As the events of the night and the haunting dream before that began to filter through his throbbing mind, anger bubbled up.
Fucking O'Dimm.
Johnny snarled, wiping his face with a rough hand.
Sneaky, double-dealing son of a bitch. Paying me like some cheap fiddle. Offering deals and shit, but at what cost?
He let out a mirthless chuckle, the sound echoing in the dim room.
Look at you, Johnny Silverhand,
he said mockingly to his reflection.
Thinking you're the big shot, that you've got it all figured out. How'd you let yourself get conned by that slippery devil? Too desperate for another shot at life, weren't you?
The self-deprecation in his tone was palpable as he laughed at his own gullibility. A chime from the terminal in the main room caught his attention. He went over to find the message from Black Mirror, reading it with a growing mix of rage and trepidation.
Greetings, Mr. Silverhand. Acclimating to your new reality, are you? Our encounter may feel like a hazy reverie, yet our pact was as concrete as the streets of Night City. In this grand scheme, there are no respawns, no do-overs. Each choice carves a deep groove in the world's fabric, and some channels run to darker waters. Remember the small favor we discussed? I'll be expecting you at the afterlife as the clock strikes 12. Don't keep me waiting.
His fingers clenched, nails digging into the palm of V's hand. The terminal blinked back to its default state, the message having self-deleted.
Fuck.
Johnny's voice was a low growl.
Play your games, O'Dimm, but I'm no one's pawn. You want a show? I'll give you one hell of a performance.
He kicked the nearby table, sending empty bottles crashing to the floor. Breathing heavily, the realization of the reality of his situation, the fragility of V's body, and the impending doom from the biochip bore down on him. The weight of his decisions, the guilt of using V, and the wrath against Gaunter amalgamated into a storm of emotions. Swearing under his breath, he tried to piece together a plan. Every step he took, every choice from now on, would be under the shadow of Gaunter's twisted game. And Johnny, ever the defiant rebel, was not about to play by anyone's rules, but his own.